Chers auditeurs,
Dear listeners,
bonjour.
welcome to Comme d'Archi Podcast Season 5.
Saison 5, dans le monde fascinant des architectes.
And in the architectural projects.
Je suis Anne-Charlotte Deponte, passionnée d'architecture et docteur des universités en histoire de l'archi.
I am one of the spokespersons of Anne-Charlotte, who is a PhD in architecture history.
Merci
Thank you
d'être avec moi aujourd'hui.
to be with us today.
Et
And
maintenant,
now,
lundi en français, place au talent.
and Wednesday, let's talk projects. In English, of course.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Dear listeners, welcome to this summer's Comme d'Archi dedicated to swimming pools. This is Esther on behalf of Anne-Charlotte. In the previous episode, we talked about the Vers-sur-Marne Leisure Center, a competition venue that doubles as a holiday resort. On the subject of water games, let's talk about history, leading up to social emancipation and, finally, well-being. A little more history. In Architecture du Sport, Alexandre Lebas states, and I quote, that throughout the second half of the 19th century, and more broadly up to 1914, private initiative sport monopolized attention, both in terms of the development of its facilities and the size of the interested public. It was part of a market economy. The Commercial Code of 1808, amended by the law of 1867, provided an institutional framework. Horse racing and regatta organizations, or private swimming pools, were owned by shareholders grouped together in sociétés anonymes, such as the Société des Régates Parisiennes and the Société d'Encouragement des Sports Nautiques. This hybrid concept of sport blended leisure and business. End of quote. Nevertheless, one of the few swimming pools built on the outskirts of Paris before the Great Wall was anything but a commercial establishment. It's a private pool. It belonged to wealthy American Frank J. Gould, who in 1912 commissioned architect Moog to build the pool next to his home in Maison Lafitte. The idea was to build a leisure pool for his own use and that of his entourage. At the time, this example appeared to be unique in France. The published program included a swimming pool and greenhouse on the private grounds. The rectangular building, designed on a sort of basilical plan, houses a pool under a central vessel, while the sides house greenhouses. The basilical plan, the Doric columns, the porch with its terrace and pergola, and the Pompeian-inspired interior decorative scheme are all part of a historic architecture that has become eclectic. However, it exploits the new potential of concrete and the transparency of greenhouses. In France, however, the term natation first appeared in 1785, when Barthélemy Turquin opened the first swimming school on a floating pool on the Seine in the 5th arrondissement of Paris. In the 19th century, the first public baths were opened throughout France. These baths met with great popular success. They were a meeting place for different social classes. They paved the way. The notion of sport and fun was present, but above all, and this was new, was the development of hygiene. In the 1920s, 1930s, France launched the construction of some 20 public swimming pools, emphasizing the notions of play, sport, and pleasure. But France lagged far behind Germany and the United Kingdom. It wasn't until the late 1960s, in response to the failure of French swimmers at the 1968 Olympic Games, that the Secretary of State for Youth and Sport launched a vast national project to equip the country with municipal swimming pools. Under the slogan, 1000 piscines, 1,000 swimming pools. 5 typical models were selected: the Caneton, Iris, Plein Ciel, Plein Soleil, and, above all, the Tournesol, Sunflower swimming pool. the result of the National Industrial Swimming Pool Construction Program launched in the early 1970s, which led to the construction of some 183 pools of this type in France in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Their mechanical design and futuristic aesthetics are still popular today, even if many of them have been demolished due to their obsolescence in the face of new demands and changes in usage. The architect of the Tournesol pool, Bernard Scheller, designed his project on the principle of a pool covered by a partially retractable sea urchin shell dome. This solution combines the summer and winter pools in one. The structural engineer, Themis Konstantinidis, is Greek. At the end of the 20th century, he was a well-known engineer specializing in metal structures. Anne-Charlotte knew him at Paul de Pont. He loved ouzo and talking about his native Greece with his deep voice and pronounced accent. An imperfect character, endearing and above all, competent. A welded tubular steel structure was chosen, clad with double-curved tiles molded in plastic. Lighting is provided by portholes. 85% of components are industrialized. Bernard Scheller told Patrick Facon in 1997 that, I quote, "The Tournesol swimming pool is an industrial and consumable product that can no longer be depreciated like a stone building and must be maintained like an industrial product. We had planned with the companies to buy up pools that municipalities no longer wanted, dismantle them, transport them, and reassemble them elsewhere. But every time I go into a Tournesol pool and see the kids splashing around in there, I'm delighted, telling myself that it's a win-win situation. A generation or two have learned to swim in the Tournesol pools." End of quote. The main criticism leveled at these pools was that they were based on models rather than contextualization and adaptation to the site. Nevertheless, they stuck to the futuristic vision of the time, linked to the idea of mobility. Today's state-of-the-art swimming pool is the emblematic new Centre Aquatique de Saint-Denis, designed by Atelier 234 and Venhoven CS. We have already devoted an issue of Comme d'Archi to the building, which was then in the construction phase. At the outset, the client, the Métropole du Grand Paris, asked for a great deal of work to be done on the heritage aspect, and for the people of Saint-Denis, including schools, to be able to benefit from it. Once again, sport and water are a vector for social emancipation. But, unlike the Tournesol pools, despite their grand proportions, far fewer will benefit from them. That said, there are two key elements that make this an exemplary project. Its integration into the redefined urban fabric, with a sporting continuity opposite the Stade de France, and a new crossing, and its ecological approach, so that the pool's typology remains relevant in these demanding times, and in the face of climate disruption. Here are the key elements. Thanks to the ingenious compactness and organization of the building, half of the plot's space can be freed up for outdoor areas, thus maximizing the amount of open space. 102 trees and shrubs are planted to last. 100% of soil reused on site. Awarded the BioCity label, 85% recovered in renewable energy, 50% of water reclaimed, and up to 40% reused, which is the maximum possible within the legal framework. 5,000 square meters urban solar farm, HQE sports facility label, exceptional level. And that's without going into all the details of this new temple to bathing. We're spoiled, but for how long? And we really don't measure it enough. Dear listeners, thank you for tuning in. Let's meet up next week for a new issue devoted entirely to well-being. we really need it, and to bring our summer series to a fitting close. Until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening.
And thanks to the sound engineer who was collaborating with us today.
Don't forget to tune in to our previews on Instagram at Comme d'Archi Podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, don't hesitate to promote it by giving it 5 stars and a little comment on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast platform. And above all, subscribe to listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.